I thought we should look through the history of some political beards. So this is the 19th President of the United States, Mr. Rutherford B. Hayes, and that's a mighty beard, Mr. Hayes. And then we get into Mr. Garfield. He's another president of the United States. And then rounding out the top 10, Mr. Adolf Hitler. Well, we'll just keep going. Oh, Joseph Stalin. Oh my goodness. Che Guevara. Oh man, look at all these. I don't know who Mr. Burnside. I don't think he killed a lot of people. Here's Mr. Lenin. Number 4. Number 3, Fidel. Number 2, Teddy Roosevelt. Okay, I liked him in Night at the Museum. And Abraham Lincoln. Oh wow, he was good in. Was it 12 Years a Slave? Oh no, Lincoln that year, 2012. And why am I pointing out facial hair of leaders and rounding out the top 10. Now, I didn't make that list. I want to make clear the link is in the description. It was provided by complex.com. But here's Vice reporting. I used air quotes there, reporting on Canadian politics. I think this is unironic. I don't think they're trying to be funny. But here's the headline. They say Justin Trudeau has a beard now. What does it mean? A few theories on what the Prime Minister's new facial hair could possibly mean. And this is Trudeau with a beard. There you go if you're watching the video. If you're on the podcast, well, it's gray and focused at the front. And if you scroll down, I'm not going to read any of this, right? Because one of the headlines says he's a serious politician. All it took was a beard. He's a serious politician now. I mean... Well, I hope that put a smile on your face. I can't believe, really? This is news? This is like a legitimate news source? Ha, what a joke. This is news. This is Canadian news. This is Andrew Lecce, the PC government's education minister, meeting with the deputy leader of the Conservative Party, former Liberal minister Alleslev. And isn't that weird? Because the Conservatives are currently leaderless with Andrew Scheer the leader until the next leader is found. So, I mean, they've got Andrew Scheer, but he's not leading the party into the next election. And if you look at his Twitter, he's just recycling old Twitter posts from the election. It's the same rhetoric. So it leads me to believe that somebody's in charge of his Twitter account, which, whatever. I mean, that's how politics goes. If you're not into it, like if you don't do Twitter, somebody on your team is going to do it for you. So whatever. It's weird that way. Anyway, that would be news. This would also be news. NDP MPPs sing and chant as dead terrorists honored. That's news. There's 2 NDP MPPs, which is the provincial MPs. They decided to come out to the pro-terrorist rally, the Mr. Soleimani, right? That's weird. That's news, though, right? Here's some other Canadian news that you could. This is less politics, but I mean, it has to do with politics. It has to do with the policy. Although you could forgive Vice for not making that leap, but I'm making that leap. So CBC News is reporting foreclosure rate steadily increasing in Fort McMurray. Fort McMurray saw about 8 times more foreclosures on homes in 2019 than in 2015, new numbers from the province show. In the 2015-16 fiscal year, there were 26 foreclosure statements of claim in Alberta's oil sands capital. In 2018-19, there were 220. According to data from the Alberta Justice and Solicitor General, in the current fiscal year, there were 219 claims to the end of November. A drop in property prices, an increase in insurance costs since the 2016 fire have put pressure on homeowners in the town. Many homeowners bought when prices were much higher, and there were abundant jobs in the oil and gas industry. But the work has disappeared, household incomes have dropped, and many are walking away from their homes to seek opportunities elsewhere. Oh, the perfect time for foreign investors to buy up property at rock bottom rates. I say that unironically because that's what happens. That's what happens. So that's all Canadian news, but I don't think Justin Trudeau's beard is Canadian news. We'll see where he goes with it, right? We'll see where he goes. His first term was a disaster. Will he end up like Teddy Roosevelt or one of the others on the list? You know, like Hayes or Garfield, right? Moving on, the Globe and Mail is reporting 20 hours ago, Australia's wildfires show the perils of ignoring climate change threats. It's frustrating because it's been really clear that the Australian fires were the result and are the result of firebugs and arsonists. There have been a lot of arrests. Now I don't know if all the fires are arsonists, but quite a few are, and there are a lot of arrests, and the police are operating on that assumption. So I'm just stating what the police are coming out with. Here's the Australian, says brush fires, firebugs fueling crisis as arson arrests hit 183. And So I think it's irresponsible when that was published on January 8th. That was today in Australia, right? Because they're a bit ahead of us. And we're publishing and updating articles talking about the wildfires, showing the perils of ignoring climate change when that's not the main reason driving these fires. And that's provable. So I just think that it's irresponsible of our media to ignore the fact that and the role that arson's playing in these fires and historically in Canadian fires. I talked about this yesterday a lot, so I'm not going to get into it today. But I wanted to show this. This isn't the tweet I wanted to show. The tweet I wanted to show was a little bit more poignant, but this is good enough. And I'm going to show you one more thing. It says, coming ice age, global warming, peak oil, hole in the ozone layer, asteroid extinction, California going to slide into the ocean. I also heard New York. Nuclear annihilation, and many others. And how many predictions have been right? Not one. But they have all been used to leverage policy changes, right? From like acid rain, the ozone layer, more taxes. Global warming has leveraged carbon taxes, making everything a lot more expensive in Canada. But none of these predictions have come true. Not one. Here's a long, exhausting, I was going to say investigative, but exhaustive list of newspaper headlines that are sensationalized a decade out usually and never came true. And yet, a lot of these influenced policy and public opinion quite a lot. So the link is in the description. The link to all of these articles is in this article. So it's really, it's quite interesting. 1967, dire famine by 1975. And I'm not going to go into read each one of these, but I'll read you the headlines. 1969, everyone will disappear in a cloud of blue steam by 1989. So that's pretty interesting. You can actually read the article online here if you want to. The next one is 1970, Ice Age by the year 2000. Did you guys catch the Ice Age? We had a pretty brutal winter that year, I think, but I didn't catch an Ice Age that year. 1970, America subject to water rationing by 1974 and food rationing by 1980. That Ronald Reagan, or was it Jimmy Carter by 1980? No, I think it was Reagan by 80, right? Depends on what date in 1980, I suppose. 1971, new Ice Age coming. New Ice Age coming. Yeah, no. 1972, new ice age. By 2070, they were extremely detailed in their forecasting. No idea what next week's weather is going to be, but by 2070, definitely an ice age. In 1974, new ice age coming fast. Space satellites show new ice age coming fast. Yeah. 1974, another ice age. 1974, ozone depletion, a great peril to life. That one stuck, right? By the 1980s, it was acid rain. Everybody's going to die. Acid rain and killer bees, too. 1976, the cooling. I'm not going to read that one, but whatever. 1980, acid rain kills life in lakes. I remember that. I remember that. 10 years later, the U.S. government program formed to study an acid rain concluded, acid rain, no environmental crisis. Study concludes. Oh, well, isn't that a relief? A decade later, and how many millions of dollars spent in the 80s on that? 1978, no end in sight to 30-year cooling trend. It's cooling in 1978, but not if you listen to the current rhetoric. According to NASA satellite data, there's a slight warming trend since 1979, and we've been cooling actually since 2011, I think. Or maybe 2014. Anyway, it doesn't matter. 1988, James Hansen forecasts increased regional drought in the 1990s. So he got it wrong, but still decade out, right? It's going to happen soon. The drought's going to happen. Consensus says it. Everybody says it. 1988, Washington, D.C., days over 90 Fahrenheit to go from 35 to 85. Prepare for long, hot summers, says the newspaper. Which one is this? The Lansing State Journal. But the number of hot days in the DC area peaked in 1911 and have been declining ever since. So that's the number of hot days. And you can see the source if you like. The 1988 Maldives completely underwater in 30 years. We are 30 years from that date, actually 32 from 1988. And are the Maldives underwater? They are not. Ask Tony Heller. He takes there's a live stream cam. I did this on my show the other day. We looked at Tony Heller's Maldives camera, and it's not underwater. Yay! It's something to celebrate, everybody. They've always been wrong. 1989, rising seas to obliterate nations by the year 2000. Well, I haven't seen any nations obliterated except by perhaps U.S. military forces, right? In their battle of Iraq in 2003. But, it's not climate change. It's people being people, doing what people do. Back to the article. 1989, New York City's West Side Highway underwater by 2019. Was it underwater? I mean, maybe there was a water main break, right? It wasn't underwater. It wasn't underwater. 1995 to present climate model failures. So you can see the observed data. This is one of my favorite graphs. This is like these are the red line here is the models and the observations since, because we have it from 1975, right? They've been making the observations since 1975, and look at the observations. It's a flat line. I mean, there's some warming, but we're not nearly on the trend that they're trying to say. And really, the 1990s are about the same as the 2010s. So it's really, I mean, wow. Okay, 2000. Children won't know what snow is. I remember reading this article. I remember this one, The Independent. Yes, I think my kids know what snow is. They're excited. We get to go tobogganing. It's fun, right? 2002. Famine in 10 years, a decade. You got to give us some taxes, or in a decade, you guys are going to starve, right? You better pay up now, or in a decade, your grandchildren are going to burn up. 2008, Arctic will be ice-free by 2018. I remember Al Gore telling us that the snows of the Kilimanjaro would cease by 2016. And I lapped it up, man. I thought it was real. I was like, man, this is going to be crazy to see that disappear over the next 10 years. It didn't happen. Like, I can show you pictures, again, Tony Heller, of the Himalayas this year, and it's like a record snow season, right? They have early skiing. 2008, Arctic will be ice-free by 2018. No, Arctic's not ice-free. Al Gore, Al Gore warns of ice-free Arctic by 2013. Didn't happen. Arctic sea ice is more now than it has been in the last 8 years. 2009, Prince Charles says only 8 years to save the planet. Oh, time for the countdown to begin, guys. Got to turn the screws, right? 2009, UK Prime Minister says 50 days to save the planet from catastrophe. And on and on and on it goes. It's a fraud. It's a fraud. It's a fraud. It's never true. It's never true. It's just fraudulent. Here's another interesting thing out of the UN. I'm moving on from the climate stuff now because it's taken up so much time. The UN Racism Committee calls for the halt to Site C, Trans Mountain, and LNG pipeline. Ooh, what is Trudeau with a beard going to do? What's he going to do? Right? They're shutting down the pipeline. They're saying it's racist. You can't have a racist pipeline. And what of the construction workers? What of the gender? Oh, what's it called? The gender impact, right? Yeah, those construction workers could be problematic. Trudeau with a beard. You think about that. Look how serious he looks, right? I mean, I'm not going to read this. That's it. The last article for today, and I don't know if I'm going to take 3 minutes or 4 minutes on this. I just think it's a little crazy. Mr. Haskell, and he was a former PPC candidate and current professor at Wilfrid Laurier, I believe. He says this Globe and Mail editorial is proof our liberal elites have lost their mind when it comes to immigration. After noting that our rate is 2 times the UK and 4 times France and Germany, where social cohesion is crumbling, the Globe's big concern is traffic jams. Yeah. I'm just gonna show you the beginning of this because it's so ridiculous. It's insane. This is the Wayback Machine's version of this, and I'll let it finish loading. The title is Canadian cities are about to add millions of new residents. They can't all drive to work. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter where they live, right? If they live in a tent city or under a bridge somewhere, they can't drive to work. Back to the article. Canada has recently been the fastest growing country in the G7, with a population rising at double the pace of the United States and United Kingdom, and 4 times that of France and Germany. According to Statistics Canada projections, our country could have 48.8 million people by 2050, and that's the agency's medium growth projection. Under a high growth scenario, there could soon be 56 million Canadians. Nearly all of the future residents are going to live in the country's handful of big cities. That means millions of new urban dwellers and millions of new commuters. If we want to raise the quality of life in Canada's cities. Hold on, before we get there. They're not saying slow down immigration. They're not saying that's irresponsible that we don't have the infrastructure in place to support the amount of people that are projected to be coming to Canada. They don't say any of that. They say this is a perfect opportunity to build public transit. And I just have to point out, in Guelph, the car ownership has been increasing steadily since the 2009 or something like that. There's a report out saying in 2009, this many vehicles were registered in Guelph. In 2014, this many vehicles, 2017, and so on. And each year was more. And public transit keeps getting more funding too. leading me to believe that public transit funding does not lead to a reduction in vehicles on the road. And therefore, your hypothesis is failing, Globe and Mail. It doesn't work. More transit isn't going to fix the car problem. And what about healthcare, housing, other infrastructure such as education, elderly care? How about baristas, right? Like, we can't find people to work now. Do we think that flooding Canada with more people is going to make it easier? Because it's not working currently. All of the programs that are happening aren't making an impact. All that it's doing is making housing more expensive, having decreased satisfaction with things like healthcare and all that, all of the service delivery that the government is responsible for. And the federal government doesn't care because the provincial government is responsible for it. And so, I mean, how do you square just focusing on transit? Okay, I'm back to this. If we want to raise the quality of life in Canada's cities, rather than choking on our growth, we need better planning so that cities build up more and sprawl out less. As part of that, we need a lot more of the key piece of infrastructure that makes city life possible: mass transit. And when they say up more and sprawl out less, that means you don't get a garden or a yard. No. You get to live on top of somebody and below somebody else in a high tower in a city center. Welcome to our post-nation state. And it's going to cost you a lot. And taxes too, because, you've got to pay for all the people who aren't working but who want to live the same lifestyle that you've got. Yeah. Weird. Never mind the fact that we can watch in real time as France and the United Kingdom go through the painful process of dealing with what they've done, right? What the inaction of the previous governments has wrought. The NHS system in the United Kingdom is overrun because of a lot of free movement, a lot of illegals, high immigration rates, and the fact that the tax base just isn't keeping up with the need. And that's not a failure of the NHS. That's a failure of the politicians not planning for the amount of growth that is coming into the country, right? And saying, NHS for everyone. There used to be systems, right? It was paid for by the taxpayer. That doesn't mean it's free. People think it's free. People think this money comes from somewhere that's other than generated by human work, right? Like, it's so frustrating. So having the Globe and Mail ignore the real socio-economic and societal impacts of what's happening in the other countries, the United Kingdom, Germany, France, that we're watching, where the immigration is breaking their systems and breaking down social cohesion. And these guys are saying, look at the traffic. How's that going to work? And I mean, it's a legitimate question. It's not going to work, right? Like if you thought that taking 2 hours to get to Toronto from Guelph was problematic, well, wait till it takes 4, because there's just no room on the 401. One accident and the whole thing's snarled, right? And I mean, it happens regularly already. So what do you do? The solution our government wants? More people. More people. They want to hit 100 million. By 2063, that's 45 years from 2018. The plan is 63 million people. That's StatsCan. I've talked a lot about that. But they don't plan for the infrastructure. They're not investing money in Canada. They're sending money outside of Canada to fight climate change. It's not climate change. It's arson. But bearded Trudeau doesn't care. So that's where we're at. And not to mention that Mr. Trudeau isn't even really in charge of the files. That's Deputy Prime Minister Freeland. So what do you do? I mean, we're all along for the ride. It's going to be interesting. I wonder how long this government will last. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com and have a wonderful, wonderful